What's up, y'all, and welcome into the Jack Vita and Stephanie Mitchell Show.
Yay! Hi, friends.
We're back after last week. We were off. Quick update. Of course, we're recapping the 8th episode of Deal or No Deal Island, Season 2 today. Safety in Numbers is the name of the episode. And last week, we had promised to be here. Unfortunately, I got really sick.
Really sick.
Antibiotic sick. Had to miss a wedding and postpone travel plans sick.
Yeah.
So we had to postpone. Cancel, I should say. We didn't end up getting that episode last week. And then same deal, no exit interview. So my apologies on that front.
Oh, no apologies necessary, Jack. You provide us with great entertainment and fun times every week. And there is no Jack Vita podcast or Jack Vita Show without Jack Vita. So I'm glad you were able to take care of yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Steph. And Steph, of course, has been very flexible in helping plan these podcasts, these recaps. I'm out at spring training now. It's going to be a little crazy these next couple weeks. I'm doing a lot of reporting, freelance reporting. So schedule might be a little crazy. It's potential that there could be some times where I'm not able to attend an exit interview, that we might not have exit interviews. So just be subscribed to Jack Vita Show. We'll keep in touch. We'll keep you in the loop. I'll post updates on Twitter and Instagram and all that good stuff. It's at Jack Vita Show. The podcast is called is Jack Vita Show Entertainment. Follow along on Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Steph, in 30 seconds or less, what did we miss last week?
Last week, the big story is Dr. Will went home, and that was by the hand of David, who proclaimed himself to be the $5 million bodyguard in a self-destructive misfire. CK makes an adversary out of Letty and Philip, and Parvati and Philip are bumping heads, and integrity was tested last week, and CK showed that she had none. Which brings us to today.
Well, I'm really glad that I have my mom here to talk about this with.
Nice. So good.
I'm gonna start calling you mom now.
No, I will accept that honor.
No, you're supposed to joke about that. I'm not calling you mom.
I mean, this week, family is legit, and it's here to say. So, family means so many different things. I mean, I love it. I've changed my mind on how I look at family.
Oh, really? What did it for you? What shifted?
I was look, and I don't know if just Dickson is diabolical he's proven himself to be, or if he really was sincere from the heart when he had that conversation with David about you're the father that I never had, and I look at you as a father figure. And David tearfully, has this moment, and he's talking to Parvati. He kind of tears up, and I'm like, is this, he changed something that was super cringy into is this something tender and nice? I'm like, is this man for real? So
I don't know if he is. I think you brought up a good point there. I really think that we're getting a lot more of Dickson the schemer, Dickson the strategist.
Totally.
And I don't know. I mean, it'll be really interesting if I'm able to attend an exit interview because of how crazy things are. When I get a chance to talk to Dickson, I'd love to ask him about it. The age difference between him and David is 20 years, 44, 24.
Amazing.
And it's just,
okay.
To me, I know that you can be a parent that is only 20 years, older. But to me, I just don't, when I was 24, I wasn't thinking of people in their early 40s, mid 40s as parentals. I was thinking of more of them as big brothers or cousins.
So cute. You're so cute, Jack. So of course, my oldest daughter, she's 26. And I certainly had her when I was 16. And so I know people used to just look at me like, who's this sister? And I'm like, absolutely not. That's my daughter. So I have a lot of late 20s for people that are friends to me, but really that I look at as easily being able to be my offspring. So it's very tender to me, the moment that David had where Dickson was really able to pull on his heartstrings as a parent. And I was like, is this man psychotic? Because most of the times, strategy-wise, most of the time, Dickson is very upfront about what he's doing. Like, he's like, I'm flirting with Letty because it's a strategy. But he's never let on that his relationship with David is super strategic, maybe? Or has he?
He hasn't really. But I mean, we got a little bit more of it this week where he's kind of like, oh, in the promo for next week where he's kind of like, I've positioned myself in the middle. I can play both sides. However, I'm not really sure how well positioned he is when everybody is unanimously voting him to play the banker in the excursion.
Oh.
Like if he had his hooks in with Letty and Philip, the obvious move is CK. Now, Letty did mention, I really don't want CK playing the banker. So that was smart on Letty's part. I get it. But yes. I think that, I don't know, I don't get the sense that he is quite as, I don't know. It seems like he's obviously closer with the family. Now, he could, obviously, there is room here for him to make a move because if the other two are targeting the family, then, they gladly welcome him targeting them too. So we'll see.
Right. And it definitely starting to, I think, break down into like these certain groups. And some people seem to be sticking together. This is from Letty's perspective, is that it's Letty, Dickson, Philip. That's what she says. And also David, Parv, Dickson is also kind of another group. And then we have Lachelle and then we have CK kind of floating in the middle, both of those two. So this week we really got to see these things further divide. And I think just like Dr. Will and people who are more expertly playing, I feel like more strategic game, they really acutely understand the power that is in playing the banker. Like, it is to be feared, but it must be done. It must be done.
Yeah.
You have to, it's a position of power. So if you don't have explicit trust in the person playing the banker, they cannot. And conversely, you want people playing the banker, obviously, that are going to have your best interest. It's the most powerful place you can be in this game, is right there next to Joe.
Well, when you were on season 1, at the start of the season, the first couple rounds, it looked like people were like, oh, I don't want to play the banker. Yep. That's tricky. That's dangerous. And then all of a sudden, sometime like around episode 4, episode 5, it was like a light bulb went off. And you guys were like, actually, we do want to play the banker. And we're going to target the Rob Mob or whoever it was, And this season, it's been the opposite, where people haven't really wanted to play the banker.
Yeah, don't be scared. What I saw, I'm so sorry, but also not. What I saw this week, particularly in that excursion where basically David and Parvati skipped, hopped, jumped, and slid their way to doing whatever it is that they wanted, which just further exemplifies that, they're not getting much pushback from people who are playing more aggressively. They got the most aggressive player out that was targeting them, which was Dr. Will. And they've somehow also, I think, managed to get CK sort of in their graces. So like we're witnessing exemplary gameplay here by Parvati and David. It's shameful. This episode, it was shameful.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I want to give Dickson, I think Dickson had a good episode. I think he had a really good episode, even though the episode ended with, I hate Dickson, this is all his fault, CK said that. I was cracking up when she said that because here's the thing, a peek behind the curtain of the life of one Jack Vita. I'm staying here in Mesa, Arizona with a married couple that I'm very great friends with. You just met my buddy John. I'm staying with him and his wife Sarah. And they watched the episode with me last night. They had not watched it before. And Sarah, she's like, why does everybody hate this guy? Like, she's just watching the episode like, they all hate him. I feel bad for him. He seems nice.
Yeah, okay, all right. Oh my goodness. Is it, and this is of David? Is that who we're speaking of?
No,
Of David?
Dickson.
Or Dickson. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to hate David and I can't right now in this moment. And it's like really bothering me.
Well, no, she meant like the people on the show all seem like they hate Dickson.
Totally.
But I still think, despite that, I thought Dickson had a really good episode. And I think it's because one thing I think one of the best moves that he made in the episode was just like volunteering and being like the strongest people should move on and go forward in this excursion, which it was total bogus that Letty's not leading the charge in that. Like her and Philip are probably the two most toned people on.
Literally, I was like, what is happening here? How much pushback did you see, Jack? You're not going to be nominating me, friend. I'll volunteer, but how much pushback did you see
from Letty?
Yes,
you know what?
Behind first,
I think she pushed back. I think that it seemed like she kind of pushed back, and she was so irritated by it. You don't think she did? No.
If she would have pushed back looks like not being the first person to agree. The answer is no. In this moment, the answer is no. I am strong. How many times has Letty come out on top in an athletic?
She won the last
excursion. 3. Hello. Who's gonna hold you back? Not me. What type of like excuse could they use for saying our most toned athletic female should be staying here? And she's like, oh, little pushback. Not first, baby. Dickson, get off the train. Look at you. You're never gonna help us. That's reasonable.
It was weird because like there weren't any other people really objecting to it because it's like, I mean, it was really strange. This goes back to what Parvati said in the first episode when she said I could be a cult leader. This felt like a cult where it was like nobody is questioning this, no one's pushing back on this, and then they just went one by one, and this is like they've had a couple of challenges that are somewhat similar to this on Deal or No Deal Island, but really the kind of origin of having a challenge like this was in season 4 of Survivor Marquesas.
Okay.
The coconut challenge where the Road to 4, it was the first power shift in the history of Survivor, and it was like it became clear that there were these 4 people on the top and they had 3 people that were kind of helping them out and then 2 that were clear on the bottom from the other tribe. And they're like, this is what the pecking order is going to be. We got to do something to change it. Yes. First ever power shift in the history of Survivor. And that's my hope, is that you have these challenges that can sometimes open the eyes of the players and be like, this is where I stand. This is what's going to happen. Now, Dickson, he volunteered. I think it almost helped. I think another way that it helped him out is because it didn't make it super obvious. If he had been one of the last 3 people left, then it becomes even more obvious. It's like, this is the 3 at the top. Instead, it's the Parvati and David, and now I guess Lachelle is kind of in this mix. We really did not see much of any Lachelle the whole season, which I think is a shame because I think we saw a little bit of her personality last night and seemed pretty fun.
Absolutely. I agree. I thought it was great conversation. Lachelle also didn't give as much pushback. And I understand, though, on her behalf, I do think that was an active strategy because editing or whatever aside, Lachelle has successfully navigated the middle of the road this entire time. She, even when suspicion was thrown her way about all the people who concocted to go home by CK, and she kind of threw her name out there, she still managed to kind of be in the middle. And as we've seen from season 1, that's an active strategy for some people to try to be in a position where you don't have adversaries. Nobody's mentioned Lachelle. Nobody's really gone for her and said, this woman's a threat. This woman's a threat. It's never happened. So I was wishing to see more of Lachelle also, but it was tough for me. I was really sad to see her go.
It's really interesting because this family seems like it's got toxicities within this family because I just don't understand the cohesiveness of this group because you had Dickson taking out MG, who's supposed to be part of the group, and then you had, he took out Storm, and then MG was really upset at Dickson. I apologize.
Yes. Okay.
And Storm wasn't a part of the group. And, it's becoming more clear that he was on the other side. So that, may age and turn out to be a pretty good move because they got out a number that wasn't for them. But it really upset MG, and she was a part of that group. And now, CK, is she a part of this group? She's on the side with Parvati, but she wants Dickson out. And then Lachelle really wants Dickson out. And Lachelle says, well, I want Dickson out because then Parvati's going to have to trust me more. And it's just like, it's a really odd way to play the game where it feels very much like, high school where you've got like these cool kids that other people are trying to fit in with and they just bag on each other to try to fit in with the cool kids rather than some kind of unit where it's like 4 or 5 people that are really tight.
And we can only make assumptions on what they've shown us. For all we know, they could have had a close connection. Would Lachelle ever be in the place to replace Dickson? I can't see that being what happens, but we at this point, we can only talk about what actually occurred, and what actually occurred was a misjudgment on thinking that she would replace Dickson, and somehow if she gave loyalty to Parvati. I don't know if that was gameplay, if she genuinely believed it, but the family's closed. The family's been closed for 8 episodes. There's a core and you ain't in it. That's what it looks like from the edit. And that's a terrible way to be. She's in the middle.
Lachelle said that she was going to take out Dickson.
Yeah.
And Dickson is probably going to take out CK. We didn't get a clip of Dickson saying who he's going to take out, but CK was coming for Dickson, and even though Dickson sort of spared CK, it's just like, it's weird. I don't understand the CK factor. She's a real wild card here, but like, I think that it's a lose for the family either way because they have members of their alliance that are going to take shots at other parts of the alliance that are pieces in their game rather than going for the obvious people that are opposing them.
But also, no one's opposing them. They ran up that mountain unopposed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy to me because Parvati has been safe now for 8 straight weeks.
Hello.
And
let's talk about it.
It's like, there's certain stuff within this game where, fans are going to say, why do some of these, like, Rob gets a lot of safety or Parvati gets a lot of safety? Like, they clearly want them on the show. And I think that there's a little bit of, like, a fair point to be made there, because like, for instance, one of these challenges, the one where Philip and Parvati first started to lie to each other, like the highest total was in the same spot, and who had the highest total on their side? Parvati. You telling me that that's not a coincidence? Like,
I think it's a coincidence. I do. I think it's a coincidence. In terms of like the actual gameplay, sometimes I do think it's fair and equitable. Sometimes I don't know. You're like, is this set up? But I like to think there is, for real, the way the structure of the game is. I do like to think in my hearts of hearts that it is a game of it that is integrity from that standpoint. Now, the participants, they could run around, try to skimp the rules. They could lie, cheat, steal, all of those things. But I think like in terms of like real game stuff, like rules are rules. And we've seen that like, a couple times where people try to skirt it and break through those actual rules that they put in place to be fair. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I could look at it like, I love a good conspiracy theory.
Well, there are challenges where it was like the biggest threats were protected. True. Challenges that are designed for the people that have, the biggest targets to get safety because they want those people on the show longer. Yeah,
that's so true. That's so true. It's so true because even at the excursion that we saw this week, even if you had any sort of strategy, which all of the people who eliminated was sent down the hill, which they didn't, which they had none. But even if they had a strategy on why they would want to have stayed behind, they weren't able to implement that strategy. And even if they were, Joe had that rule. I mean, the proposition where all three of them would have to come together. So even if you planned, it's still just a game of chance because you can't, there's too many twists. And if that would be one criticism that I have this particular season, is that the rules are certainly very convoluted. They're not exactly clear, and they're layers upon layers. Keep it simple. Make it simple. All of these other additional twists and turns and rules inside of rules, I had to rewind several times and say, what is this game again? Like, what are the caveats? I don't know. So,
well, and I mean, even if Letty did push back, was she able to, like, if she pushed back extremely hard, is she able to, like, get out of that position? Because it seemed like they just kind of outnumbered her and were like, yeah, you're doing this. You're staying here.
I mean,
they're gonna vote.
Look, Dr. Will would have threatened them within their life. He would have said, if you do it and I get down and for some reason I'm taking you down, he would have been radical, because you can't get out first and just walk away and let your adversaries advance to a position of power where then they get to choose. Where's the cojones this episode? Excuse my whatever that is, Mexican. I don't know. Whatever, like, I feel like you have to do something. You cannot be complacent. Like, get radical. Now's the time. Anyway, but that's a strategy. Or you can just.
Well, I just think that they were going to be dead in this challenge regardless, because it was a numbers challenge. And
true. Okay.
So that's going to benefit people that have the numbers. So, like, the fact of where these two people sit in the game and the way that some of the people around them are playing the game, where it's like, instead of going for the head of the snake, let's just sideswipe each other to try to be in with the snake. Like, it's a weird way of playing the game. I'm really, really intrigued by what Dickson might do next week, because if Dickson is this big time cutthroat player, he's going to make a big move. And then I think we're going to really, that's going to say a lot about his gameplay and his strategy, and we'd like to see it. We'd like to see the big move and stuff like that. But I mean, like, CK and Lachelle, they're not going to go after Parvati and David in this challenge. But the other thing that to me is just like, it's just ridiculous that you're keeping Lachelle in this challenge, because Lachelle says the reason why she dips out is because she doesn't want a zip line. So she should have been the first person out at the start of the challenge if it's like, we got to get out the weakest link.
I mean, duh. Right. Let's be for real. And nobody made that argument. The moment you sent these people home on not following, sent people down the hill, not following what the banker specifically asked you to do, which was choose the people behind that aren't going to make it to the top. Lachelle and Phillip in a foot race, don't even talk about it. You've seen what Phillip did. He runs like a robot. He busted Parvati out of the way one time. You've got the only logical people that should have been moved forward up that hill are people who have shown in the previous excursions that physicality is not an issue for them, and that is what they rely on. Lachelle herself, this episode says, I have just been playing like a social game. She's not into the foot race like Dr. Will. Did he run through that maze or whatever that time? He didn't. When they all had to unlock themselves, he didn't. He threw the keys and went on a leisurely stroll. That's not his. That's not his thing. He's not into it. He's not into it. He knows his strong suits. So Lachelle, you should have been left behind.
What do we make of this Parvati and Phillip fiasco?
So I had some notes on that. Let's talk about that apology there. Phillip says he has integrity. Parvati says that he is emotionally manipulative. That's what she calls Phillip, and that he's playing mind games. But what I witnessed was someone who was very sincere. So I'm laughing because I feel like Phillip was very sincere, and I feel like Parvati attempted to be very sincere, and her words seem very sincere, but the tears seem insincere. Does that make sense?
I thought this is exactly like Traders last season, where she starts putting on the waterworks, and she says in the confessional, like, I'm really good at, I can cry and make people. Yeah. She basically said, I'm emotionally manipulative. Like, she said that about herself, And that's like what Jeff Probst has said about her for like 15 years, is that she is this master manipulator of blah, blah, blah. And she went back to the crying playbook, and he didn't buy it. No. And John on Traders last year didn't buy it either.
No, it is gonna buy. I was like, the words are so real, but your acting is so terrible. But also, I mean, though I was like, Parvati, just give me one tear. Just give me one like real emotion. And then she confirmed it. I'm not just making this up, because in the very next confessional, she's like, or she's walking away from the conversation, was like, oh, anyway, it didn't work. You know, kind of like, oh, well, he didn't buy it. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, that was not, I did not see emotional manipulation there. That felt like gaslighting to me, because it's like the dude was really hurt by this thing. He's made it very clear. He's talked about it on social media.
Yes.
This is something that we don't know the ins of it. But we do know that Philip was bullied as a kid, and that's something that has stuck with him for a long time. And while I can't speak to Philip's experiences, like I have friends, some of my best friends, who they encountered stuff like that as a kid, and it has stuck with them their whole lives. And they go to therapy now, and there's just experiences, and it's trauma. Yeah. And he was very, very real about that trauma. And the way that Parvati used it was she weaponized his trauma against him. He made this very clear as to why it upset him so much. I did not see it as emotional manipulation from Philip.
Okay, no. How exactly? However, it's interesting that Parvati names Philip's behavior as emotionally manipulative, but literally what she did in that first situation was emotionally manipulative. Yeah. So it's like it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Like, girl, you are the one playing the mind games, and she admittedly so. You know, but it's interesting to watch.
Well, we've now had, she's branded someone as emotionally manipulative. She's branded someone else as diagnosably like narcissistic.
Honey.
So we got to be a little careful with these like diagnosable terms that we're throwing out, and it's usually
a mirror to self. It's a mirror to self. Like the things that you think you're exuding and name calling, like, honey, you're exhibiting behavior that is reflective of yourself. But I don't know if it's gameplay or whatever, but we talked about that too. Be careful about those labels and stuff. But anyway.
Did you think that there was some kind of strategy to him, as Parvati talked about, kind of dumping it on her right before an excursion?
No, that was like nonsensical. Sorry. I wonder how long it took her to think about that. Like it's a conversation. Honey, we know you got 2.2 seconds of situations going on before you need to be up, out on the next excursion. And that's from the behind the scenes part. Sometimes you don't have time. So no, he spoke about it.
The only time that he has to have that conversation with her is night after temple, which emotions are running really high, and you're thinking about the person who just went out, and sometimes you might want to sit on it till the next morning because you're already emotional and you're tired from the whole day. You got time in the morning, and then you have the excursion, and then when you said this a few weeks ago, when you get back from the excursion, you only have like a really small amount of time to strategize. So like this wasn't really. It didn't seem like it was if it was a strategy thing, wouldn't he have saved it before temple as some kind of like a, please don't throw me under the bus because you did this to me and you owe me and you're a jerk and blah, 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 blah. Instead, it's like, well, let's try to have this conversation, this moment. It was clearly something that upset him a lot, that was hard for him to talk about. And that was the time in which he used to have that conversation. And we weren't able to find a resolution either.
And it was necessary for Philip to have that conversation, even though Dr. Will was already gone. So it was a moot point to even have the conversation unless it truly mattered to Philip, because Dr. Will was gone, and that was who the conversation was about, and all of these things. So I feel like he was appropriate. He in the morning, the time presented itself. He grabbed Parvati. He had the conversation. When he said what he had to say, he gathered his things and left. That's not strategy. Like it is what it is, I think.
All right, let's see. What else do we have from this episode? I'm looking through my notes here.
Okay.
One thing that I thought was interesting Dickson was really bothered by the fact that Parvati was even wavering on it. And this is something else that I don't think she did well. She should have told who's playing the banker much earlier. Like, when you make that decision, do it before Temple. Tell the person. Instead, what you end up doing is, if you make both of those people highly anxious, now, like Dickson's saying this thing, he's like, look at how anxious he is at Temple. He thinks he might go up, and that's different from the week before that, where David is having to pick who's going home. That's a different thing. This is like a decision that Parvati probably should have thought about, or much earlier. And maybe she was wavering and thinking about it down to the wire, but like, it seemed more like, I don't want to tell Lachelle until Temple for some reason. But it was something that really upset Dickson.
I think, again, we're dealing with a situation of timing. Sometimes you have an excursion and it's a while before you go to Temple. Sometimes, it's a while. This one, it looked like some conversations needed to happen after that excursion. She basically guaranteed Lachelle that she'd be safe. And also, Dickson was an option. So you don't know how the excursion is going to shake out. She was left with two, as she felt it, unfavorable options. So conversations needed to happen. And then she had to decide. She's even talking with David when she's in the shower. They're getting ready for Temple. So I think it's a timing thing. Not to mention, believe it or not, there's dinner in between there. And if I can say one thing in terms of behind the scenes, is like, if you don't see it on camera, it didn't happen. So there's some conversations that, like, if they're having dinner, you're not talking, you're not able to strategize. So all the time in the world is they didn't have. So some people,
she had time. She had time where she's sitting on the swing with Dickson, and Dickson is like, oh, I might go up. And then she had the time to sit and talk with Lachelle, and Lachelle tells her, like, I'm going to take Dickson out if I win. So anyway, that was really, I don't know. I thought that was odd that Dickson, and he's just like, the one thing that I thought was really interesting, he made a comment he thought he's Parvati's number one. He made a comment to that effect in this episode.
Okay, sure. He does that.
Supposed to be your number one.
Yeah, that's
right.
Come on,
to us, like, come on, we see it as the viewer.
No,
David is the number one to Parvati.
And if let Dickson tell it, everyone sees him as the number one. So I don't believe anything he says in terms of, like, you're my number one. Like, I don't believe that at all.
No, he said it in a confessional. He's like, I'm supposed to be your number one, referring to Parvati is what he said.
Right. Everyone else is supposed to choose him as his number one. That's how I think he's positioned himself. Is he also their number one? You know what I mean? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Dickson's yet to show us that he has the ability to have loyalty to anybody. He hasn't demonstrated it. He hasn't really had to, unless he has, but I haven't seen that. Like him being put for loyal, into a corner where he's had to, like, choose. I don't know. He hasn't shown it.
Another comment that my friend's wife made last night as we were watching the episode was Parvati said that she and David have been role-playing as husband and wife as a family. And she's just said, that's really weird. She didn't know any of the context. She's just like, that's really weird.
Yeah, it makes me a little uncomfortable. This week we did see that mom and dad were pulled into the new role as king and queen. And I think Parvati, when she was choosing who to play, Joe put an imaginary crown on her head also as a queen. So I'm like, okay, I'd rather you be king and queen rather than mom and dad, because you're making me uncomfy. Even though David makes an adorable dad, I will admit he makes a very adorable dad. And even his little son made it even more, like, tender and adorable, as Parvati said. And I really hate that I feel that way.
What about Lachelle accepting the deal when she had a 1 in 3 shot of getting a good deal?
Yeah, you try to get to 50-50 at best. You know what I mean?
You're guaranteed 50-50. You're always going to get a 50-50 if you don't take the bad deal. Or if you don't take a deal, you're always going to have a shot at 50-50 as your best, highest probability, because then you have the choice between keeping your case and whatever's on the board.
Okay. I have that condition where I get confused with numbers, and maybe that's what happened with Lachelle. Like I can have two you saw me at the excursion where into the swamp where I had to follow the rope. I was like, I have all the time in the world to figure out what these numbers mean. So, but I do think that 1 and 3 probably wasn't a great idea. She ended up choosing as her case 10 for May 10th, I believe, for one of her sons. And what was in her case? What did she have? $250. How much did she have?
She had 1.75, and then she accepted a deal for 1.558.
1.55. Yep, and she had 1.7. Yep, it was a higher deal, higher offer.
This is where you have a legitimate. If we get a season 3, I think season 3, I'd be interested in if you change the terms. It doesn't have to be every single episode. It could be, you could alternate, or you could change kind of what constitutes as a good deal. And this is a very good deal. She got $1.558 million towards the final case.
Yeah.
Like that, I think that is such a great deal. But you're penalized because she ends up having 1.75. It's like she played a great game of Deal or No Deal.
Doesn't matter.
But you're better off. It's just funny because you have a better chance at safety if you knock out all of the high cases and one, and then you leave all the bad cases on.
All the bad cases. Well, if you look, so that's what I'm saying. So it's like this altruistic thing, because she's like, well, at least I put 1.5 in there. Forget that. We saw Boston Rob season 1. He didn't care if he had $25 in that case. It did not matter. It's about moving forward in the game. And so realistically, you want to eliminate all of those big cases. Like, who cares? You want yourself a good deal. But it's hard. It's hard to say. It is a game of luck, chances, and statistics at the end of the day. Even when you think you have a plan, you don't have a plan. People can foil the plan. There's a twist in the plan. So you just have to play it forward. And this is always and very traditionally been the original Deal or No Deal game. All the antics aside, at the end of the day, it's just a chance.
A very wise man once said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Mike Tyson.
Okay.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah, totally. I could see that. Yeah.
All right. What else, Steph? We'll wrap up here in a few minutes, but what else you got in your notes?
Okay, it's super quick. Let's see. Letty, at one point in time, she's listing the people who was like, I can't believe this. Like, first Luke went home, then Storm, then Shell, then Will. I can't believe it. What's next? Something like that. And I'm like, honey, the way this season forgot about Rock really, burns my biscuits. Okay. Like, honey.
He must not have been in their alliance, because the group Luke was a part of their alliance at the beginning.
But who are she basically listed everybody who went home or whatever. Who else went home?
Well, Storm said when he was on this show, Storm said the alliance they called themselves something 5. Can't remember, but there were 5 of them, and it was Storm, Luke, Letty, Philip, and Seychelles was the OG 5, and then Luke was out, so then they kind of picked up Dr. Will as the next 5th as a part of that group.
See, I feel like we just never hear from him again, and I hated that. I was like, he was cool. What happened? Anyway, he was just never part of anything, so that's tough.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's what I had in my notes.
They all were very convinced. I think this goes back to last week. I think they all have been expecting, based off a law of averages, that there's going to be a bad deal coming, and nobody wanted to be that person that gets the bad deal. But I think if we went through, I could do this if I have time over the next week, and just went through what percentage of the time, because they're thinking about this like it's a 50-50 chance that you accept a good deal. I'm willing to bet that more of the time someone gets a good deal than a bad deal in the history of the 2 seasons of Deal or No Deal Island.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know who would know that immediately? Kim Matina and also Amy would know that. They would both know immediately how many good deals there have been and how many bad deals. And me, 3 episodes can go by of a new season. I will have forgotten all of it. So,
Well, anything else, Steph?
no, this is just I think I'm happy with the way that the season's going. I wish for this episode to be a little bit different, but we're going to start having to see some shifts, I think. And I'm looking forward to next week to see what those shifts look like and if people are going to step up and start making some real moves and, creating more decisive positions in this game. I'd hate to see a steamroll, honestly, at this juncture.
Yeah, and like I said, the way that this game is structured is Philip and Letty could both win safety next week, or one of them could be in control, and that could really change things. And then the other thing is that with less people in the field now, there's going to be less safety available. So it becomes more likely that someone like Parvati does become exposed and could be targeted. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Ideally, it has to be 2 trusted allies, and they have got to be in the the highest position and the lowest position. Those people control the game. It's the most risky move you can make, but that's the move, the singular solitary move that'll move you ahead in this game. It's the only way.
All right. Well, she is at Dr._midwife, Stephanie Mitchell. You can follow her on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Jack Vita Show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back again next week, and we'll look forward to talking with you guys then. Make sure you guys are all subscribed to the show. And like I said, we're going to try to get this exit interview with Lachelle. Unfortunately, I have some baseball stuff today, so I am unable to talk to her at her regular availability. But we're working with PR. We're trying to see if we can get this thing out there, and I've got a really busy next few days coming up. So if I get a chance to interview her, I'll put that out as soon as possible. But make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss out on any of it. You can follow us here on YouTube it is the Jack Vita Show Entertainment. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are found. Until next time, I'm Jack Vita alongside Stephanie Mitchell. We'll see you next week. Bring in the dancing lobsters.